Hello and welcome back to Exothermic Plays Games. I'm Exothermic and I'm back with another installment of my necessarily silly ranking series where I answer the question, why do I like Castlevania? When I was approaching the end of my year-long project, counting down my 366 favorite video games of all time, I started to spend a lot of my time thinking about what I wanted to do with my channel after it was finished. I knew I still wanted to have ranking content. I knew I wanted to have an excuse to get around to well-known games that I had yet to actually touch. That's one of the reasons I immediately tackled Celeste, a modern classic which became my new 6th favorite game of all time. I'm a little embarrassed though to admit that while I've always thought the property was really cool, I had still yet to ever play a Castlevania game in my entire life. So loaded up on the docket was an opportunity to correct that. I picked up the Castlevania Anniversary Collection and got to work on the first game in the series. And I'm glad that's the platform I picked for it because I've gotta say, this shit's hard. Releasing in 1986, the game was designed with arcade philosophies despite not actually being an arcade game. This meant that it was incredibly difficult to play, with mistakes being deeply punishing. You play as Simon Belmont, who can jump, though not especially well, duck, though not especially low, and attack with a whip in the direction you're facing, though not especially far. The game takes place over 6 different sections of Dracula's castle as you work your way across enemy and trap-filled platforming, leading up to a boss at the end of each area, and eventually you kill the vampire himself. You have health up top and can collect hearts dropped by destroyed terrain or enemies, but no, these hearts don't heal you, silly. Only Wall Chicken can do that. Instead, they're used as a resource to power the different items you can find throughout the castle, and that's one of the most interesting parts of the game, really. There's items like the pocket watch, which temporarily stops time, the fire bomb, which creates a damage over time effect on the ground, and a throwing dagger, which goes in a straight line in front of you, damaging the first thing that it hits. There's others, but they all have their own strengths and weaknesses to them, from their heart cost to interesting strategies they make available. Castlevania's biggest hurdle, however, is that you only get so many lives, and when you die you lose all your stuff, and then respawn at an earlier part of that stage, but run out of lives and you have to start all over again. Thankfully, with the Anniversary Collection, I could quick save if I was doing well and then reload that instead. And I certainly did. I did it many times, sometimes in the span of seconds. In fact, enjoy this montage of me dying over and over on the absolute dumbest mistake. So yeah, without quick saving, there's no way I was going to get past the first couple of bosses, let alone beat the game. In fact, even with quick saving, I did not beat the game. The second to last boss is extremely unforgiving, and I got locked in a quick save state where I had to basically never get hit ever, and it turns out that you can and should cheese that boss with the right item, but I didn't have it, and honestly, I didn't want to redo everything just to make sure that was set up correctly for me. Who knows, maybe I'll go back and actually beat this game someday, but it's definitely not going to be anytime soon. That's not necessarily a knock against the game overall, and certainly not a knock against the franchise. Before I jump into that, I do want to get into the ranking so I can give some context here. The original Castlevania from 1986 is my new 292nd favorite video game of all time, wedged between the original Donkey Kong at 291 and Zenbound 2 as my new 293. Some other nearby games are Final Fantasy II at 289, Spore at 296, Naruto Clash of Ninja at 294, and if you want to check out the full up-to-date ranking, you can take a look at the link in the description, but I want to explain why it's in the 290s and why I decided I'm basically done with the game after only 4 hours of gameplay, despite not beating it. There's a lot of things I really liked about Castlevania. I like the pixel art, the enemies, the setting, the music, and really every single thing about the intangibles. They're phenomenal, and I totally understand why this franchise was so immediately captivating. Mechanically, while the platforming is pretty stiff and rough around the edges, it does work. Stairs took some getting used to due to the 2D screen, but it's actually interesting to maneuver once you figure it out. Attacking feels pretty good, and several of the items feel great to use, though not all. Most importantly, however, getting to pretty quickly upgrade your whip is already a feel-good reward whenever you die and have to respawn, but if you can't, the extra challenge can actually be pretty exciting rather than just dreading going through all of the area you've already trudged through to clear. If this was the only Castlevania game, I'm certain I'd have stuck with it much longer and tried to really figure out all of the ins and outs. But it's not. Oh, Lord knows, it's not. And I made the mistake of checking out a couple others before I finished this one. And really? They're just better. There will be videos for them eventually, so we'll get into detail in those, but they're definitely just better. And I feel like I saw most of the original Castlevania and can see how it laid the groundwork not only for its own franchise, but an entire beloved genre. That means for most purposes, the game's kinda done for me, and I'm walking away with a deep appreciation for the groundwork it laid, and surprised at some of its depth, but unfortunately also surprised at its true arcade difficulty despite being a console game, without any way to kind of get around that, at least originally. In an actual arcade game, you can usually shove more quarters in to get more lives, or in other NES games of real length, like Super Mario Bros., you can earn or find extra lives, or in Castlevania's genre counterpart, Metroid, you can more consistently find ways to heal. Maybe there's a lot more wall chicken than I realize, and I just don't know where to find it all, and that's probably true, at least to some extent, but I don't need to take 50 hours to map the entire game out from trial and error, and using a full-blown map already made almost feels like cheating, since that's kind of meant to be the point of a lot of the game. I'm totally down to mess around a lot more with, for example, Bloodlines, though, so expect that in the future. But that's me for today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments or in the Discord linked in the description. I know the videos have been slow coming out lately, but I've got more in the pipeline, so I will see you next time. Goodbye.